The Joka were not a warlike species, nor did they ever imagine the day would come when their peaceful existence would be threatened. They were a species of scholars, engineers, and philosophers who had long since abandoned conflict in favor of intellectual pursuits. They had constructed vast starships that traveled the stars, exploring the unknown and cataloging the vast wonders of the galaxy. They believed that if they simply learned enough, they could avoid the conflicts that plagued other races. But their world was about to be shattered in ways they could never have anticipated. It started slowly at first, with just a few unexplained attacks on their outer colonies, mysterious ships emerging from the dark of space and obliterating their settlements without warning. The Joka tried to communicate with these unknown forces, but their efforts were met with silence, or worse, aggression. As the attacks became more frequent, the Joka realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they could have prepared for. In the dark of space, the invaders did not speak. They simply destroyed the Joka ships and stations, as if they were nothing more than fragile toys. Their weapons were powerful enough to tear through the Joka's advanced technology, as if it were paper. Their tactics brutal and effective, their vessels strange and alien, as if made from the bones of creatures that had evolved to live in the very heart of the void itself. The Joka knew they were losing. They had never built ships for combat. They had never developed weapons meant for war. They had always prided themselves on diplomacy and peaceful exploration. But there was no one to talk to now, no race that would listen, no ally who could come to their aid. Their only option was to do the unthinkable, to send out a distress signal into the dark abyss of space, hoping against hope that anyone would hear it and answer. The message was simple and desperate, a call for help broadcast across every frequency they could reach, asking for assistance from any species who might be willing to help them fend off the invaders. It was a plea for mercy, a cry for salvation, knowing full well that the chances of anyone answering were slim at best. And yet the Joka held on to the smallest shred of hope that someone out there might hear them and come to their aid. They did not know who would receive the message. They did not know whether anyone would even care, but they had no other choice. They had already lost so much. Their colonies were being erased from the map, their people scattered in fear, and now they would place their fate in the hands of a galaxy that had shown them nothing but indifference for so long. They sent the signal into the dark, hoping against hope that someone would come, and that they would not be left to fall to the invaders alone. But what the Joka did not know was that their signal would reach a very different kind of force, a force they could not have even imagined, one that had no intention of rescuing them, but rather of bringing destruction to their enemies, like none they had ever seen before. Across the stars, the message reached far and wide, but it was not received by any fleet or civilization. The Joka had expected their cry for help. Instead, it fell into the hands of the last people anyone would ever think to answer. A fleet of human warships known as the Deathworlders. The name alone sent shivers through the spines of those who had heard the rumors. These were humans who came from planets where survival was a daily struggle, a place where the land itself was a predator waiting to kill, and humans were its most cunning prey. The Deathworlders were no strangers to war and destruction. They had fought on their homeworlds against creatures that would have torn lesser beings to pieces without a second thought. They had learned the hard way how to fight, adapt, and survive against every imaginable danger from the most hostile environments. And the fiercest beasts, their civilizations were built not on peace, but on the relentless drive to dominate the harshest of conditions and emerge victorious. When the distress signal from the Joka reached their fleet, it was a call to arms, not because the humans were allies of the Joka, or because they cared about the alien species' fate, but because the Deathworlders thrived in conflict. And for them a war was not a tragedy, but an opportunity to prove their superiority in battle. Admiral Julian Kane, the fleet commander of the Deathworlder forces, listened intently as the desperate transmission echoed in the command center of his flagship, the Perilous Dawn. The Joka were asking for help, but Kane saw the message not as a plea for salvation, but as an invitation for a hunt. Admiral Kane had seen this scenario before in the countless systems they had passed through. A smaller, weaker species calling for aid against a stronger foe, a foe that had no idea what it was about to face. Kane turned to his officers and gave the orders that would send his fleet speeding towards the Joka system without hesitation, without fear. He knew the enemies of the Joka would not be able to comprehend the sheer ferocity of what was about to come. As the ships of the Deathworlder fleet began their journey, the officers of the fleet worked in perfect harmony. They knew what was expected of them, each ship a deadly weapon designed for one purpose: war with efficiency and merciless precision. The Deathworlders had no use for diplomacy, no interest in peaceful negotiations. They did not come to save, they came to end a threat, and they came with the full force of humanity's savage will. The ships that made up the fleet were unlike anything the Joka had ever seen. They were designed to survive the impossible. Vessels that could operate without shields in the harshest environments, with weapons that could carve through enemy armor like a hot knife through butter. Each ship was a testament to human ingenuity and their unmatched understanding of survival in the deadliest of conditions. At the heart of this fleet was the Perilous Dawn, an immense warship that was both fortress and weapon. It was bristling with weaponry capable of turning an entire planet into rubble in a matter of hours. Its crew was a mix of humans and alien survivors who had once been enslaved by the Joka's enemies. Now they fought together under the flag of the Deathworlders, seeking revenge for their own broken pasts. The Deathworlders were not coming to offer a helping hand. They were coming to show the Joka's enemies the true meaning of fear. They were coming to show the galaxy what it meant to fight on a Deathworld, and to emerge victorious with no mercy and no regrets. As the Deathworlder fleet surged toward the Joka system, the true scope of its power became evident. It was a sight that would haunt anyone who laid eyes on it. A blackened mass of warships, destroyers, and hulking vessels that dwarfed anything the Joka had ever seen. Each ship was a symbol of humanity's will to survive, built to endure the harshest conditions and strike back with terrifying efficiency. It wasn't just a fleet. It was a predator's pack, ready to hunt down its prey with merciless precision. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Perilous Dawn, his expression grim as he watched the stars flicker by on the massive view screen. The ship was an imposing sight in itself, towering above the rest of the fleet. Kane's eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the holotable as the fleet continued to advance. Around him, officers moved with purpose, their faces betraying nothing but the steely focus of those who knew what was coming. The fleet wasn't just a display of firepower, it was a meticulously honed instrument of war. The human ships had been designed specifically for conflict, each with a unique set of advantages. The Ravager-class cruisers were equipped with energy-absorbing shields that could withstand prolonged bombardment without faltering, while the Hunter-class frigates were quick and nimble, ideal for closing in on enemy positions and delivering devastating boarding assaults. At the core of the fleet were the massive Juggernaut-class dreadnoughts, their weaponry capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single volley. But it wasn't just the ships that made this fleet formidable, it was the crew. The Deathworlder forces were not made up of traditional military personnel. These were humans who had survived worlds where life itself fought against them. They were born into environments where the very air could kill, where storms could tear buildings apart, and where the predators were larger, faster, and stronger than any being in the galaxy. These humans were survivors of 100 different hellscapes, and they had learned to adapt, to thrive, and to fight back with everything they had. In the depths of the Perilous Dawn, soldiers prepared for combat. Their battle gear, a mixture of high-tech armor and weapons scavenged from years of warfare, gleamed under the harsh lighting. There were no speeches, no promises of glory, just the cold, unwavering understanding that when the battle began, they would not stop until the enemy was utterly destroyed. The Joka, on the other hand, watched from their observation decks in stunned silence as the fleet drew closer. They had never seen anything like it. The sheer scale of the human warships, their ominous silhouette cutting through the stars, sent waves of unease through their ranks. Their own fleet, built for peaceful exploration, was barely a match for the relentless force they were about to face. The Joka were a species that valued knowledge, diplomacy, and progress, not warfare. But even they could recognize the fearsome nature of the Deathworlders. They could only hope that the humans would understand that the Joka weren't their enemies. They were the victims, the innocents caught in the middle of a war they hadn't started. But Admiral Kane had no interest in the Joka's plight. To him, this was not about protecting a peaceful species. It was about annihilating an enemy that had dared to attack one of their own. The Kshurth, the unknown invaders, would soon learn that they had underestimated the wrong species. As the fleet approached the Joka homeworld, Admiral Kane gave the order to prepare for combat. The Deathworlders would not be arriving as saviors. They were coming as the reckoning. With a cold smile, Kane knew that the galaxy would remember this day as the day the Deathworlders had arrived to show the universe the true meaning of war. They were here to make sure that Kshurth never threatened another peaceful species again, and the Joka would learn quickly that survival was a skill the Deathworlders had mastered to perfection. The Deathworlder fleet was closing in on the Joka system, but their journey was far from uneventful. Just beyond the system's outer rim, a notorious pirate faction known as the Black Maw had been raiding ships, preying on anything that passed through their territory. The pirates, a ragtag group of scavengers and mercenaries, had once believed themselves untouchable, hiding in the shadows of space, taking what they wanted without fear of reprisal. But when the Deathworlder fleet appeared on their scanners, the pirates realized they had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Kane wasn't interested in wasting time on lowly pirates, but he knew that any interference could delay his mission. A few ships detached from the main fleet, and Kane gave the order to deal with the Black Maw swiftly. His fleet was designed to handle far worse enemies, and these pirates, while dangerous in their own right, were nothing compared to the Kshurth. The battle that ensued was swift and brutal. The Black Maw ships, equipped with hastily retrofitted weaponry, attempted to swarm the Deathworlders, launching unpredictable and chaotic attacks. But the humans were prepared for this. The Hunter-class frigates darted forward with deadly speed, cutting through the pirate lines like a razor through cloth. The Ravager-class cruisers absorbed the enemy's fire with ease, returning fire with beams of concentrated energy that tore through the pirate vessels one by one. As the pirates scrambled to retreat, the humans pursued without mercy. The Deathworlders didn't believe in surrender. They only understood victory, and they would extract every ounce of it from their enemies. The pirates fought back with desperation, but their attempts were futile. Within hours, the remnants of the Black Maw fleet were nothing more than floating wreckage in space, a testament to the Deathworlders' brutal efficiency. The destruction of the pirates was not just a victory, it was a statement. Word of the Deathworlders' ruthless tactics spread quickly, reaching both friend and foe alike. The Joka, already nervous about the arrival of the human fleet, saw the brutal aftermath of the pirates' defeat and began to realize just how serious these humans were. They had not come to save. They had come to fight, and they would show no mercy. However, not all was as simple as it seemed. Among the debris of the pirate fleet, the Deathworlders made a discovery, one that would complicate their mission. A few scattered logs, encrypted communications, and hidden caches of data suggested that the Black Maw had been working with the Kshurth. It seemed that the pirates had been acting as scouts and facilitators, guiding the Kshurth to systems where they could strike. This revelation made Kane's blood run cold. The Kshurth, the true enemy, had been coordinating with these scavengers, using them to create chaos in the outer systems. The pirates were more than just opportunistic thieves. They were pawns in a larger game. And now, the Deathworlders knew it wasn't just the Joka who were at risk. The entire sector was in danger. Admiral Kane's thoughts turned cold as he processed the new information. The Black Maw had just been a distraction, a minor nuisance. The true threat was far greater, and the Deathworlders now had one more reason to annihilate the Kshurth. The pirates' role had been one of betrayal, not just to the Joka, but to anyone who had thought they were neutral in the conflict. The fleet continued its advance, but now with even greater purpose. The Joka would not be the only ones to suffer at the hands of the Shurth. And when the Deathworlders finally made their move, the galaxy would know that no betrayal, no matter how small, would be left unpunished. The Deathworlder fleet finally arrived at the edge of the Joka system, a cold, vast expanse of stars that seemed almost too serene in contrast to the storm of war that was coming. From the command deck of the Perilous Dawn, Admiral Kane looked at the monitors, his mind already shifting to the strategy that would bring this conflict to its inevitable conclusion. As his fleet settled into position, it was impossible to ignore the overwhelming presence they commanded. The Joka, for all their intelligence and technological advances, were but a fragile species in comparison. The Deathworlders' ships loomed like great predators, casting a shadow over the peaceful Joka system. The Joka had sent a fleet to meet them, if it could even be called a fleet. Their vessels were sleek and graceful, built for exploration and scientific missions, not war. There were a few larger ships among them, but they were dwarfed by the sheer size of the Deathworlder fleet, which stretched across the stars like an unyielding wall. The Joka had never faced such a force. They were outmatched, outclassed, and deeply unsettled by the sheer brutality they sensed in the humans who commanded these ships. Admiral Kane gave his orders in his usual calm voice, but there was an unmistakable urgency beneath his words. The Joka were not his primary concern, not yet. They were, in his mind, another layer of this fight, something to be handled after the real battle began. His fleet began to maneuver into position, locking its sights on the far-off threat that had brought them here, the Shurth. The Joka, however, still didn't understand the true nature of the humans. They were not simply coming to defend. The Deathworlders came to wipe out the enemy completely. The Joka fleet hailed the Perilous Dawn for the first time. Their leader, a tall, elegant figure whose presence radiated nervous diplomacy, appeared on the holocom. His voice trembled, despite his best attempts to sound composed. Admiral Kane, we are deeply grateful for your timely arrival. We have never encountered anything like this before. You must understand, we seek only peace. Our people are not warriors. Kane didn't flinch as he stared at the image of the Joka leader. His eyes hardened, though his voice remained firm, yet gentle. Peace is a luxury for the strong, he said quietly. The Shurth are coming, and they will show you no mercy. You may seek peace, but in a universe like this, peace is something you must fight for. And when you can't fight, you get help from those who can. He gave a slight pause, letting the weight of his words settle. I will give you protection, but not without making the Shurth pay for what they've done. The Joka leader's expression faltered, but he nodded slowly, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. The Deathworlders had made their intentions clear. There would be no peace talks, no negotiating. They were there to fight, to destroy, and to leave no stone unturned in their quest to eliminate the Shurth. As the Joka prepared their meager defenses, it became evident that they were not ready for the kind of war the Deathworlders were about to bring. Their ships were sleek and beautiful, perfect for exploration, but woefully ill-suited for combat. As the Joka's diplomatic representatives began to speak again, trying to express gratitude, Kane's thoughts drifted to the real mission. The Shurth were out there, and they had already committed atrocities that no peace could undo. The Deathworlders' job wasn't to negotiate, it was to end the threat before it spread any further. Kane turned his attention back to his fleet. His voice was steady, but the fire in his words burned brightly. Prepare for battle. The Shurth won't wait much longer. The calm before the storm had passed. The Deathworlders were ready to unleash their wrath. The Joka had no idea what kind of force had just entered their lives. They were about to learn that mercy had a price, and the Deathworlders had no intention of paying it. The stillness of the Joka system was shattered when the first ripples of the Shurth fleet appeared at the farthest edges of the star system. The Deathworlder fleet had already taken position, their ships radiating a chilling aura of impending destruction. The Joka, who had been nervously awaiting their saviors, now understood the scale of the battle they were about to witness, and the depth of the threat they were facing. The Xurth fleet was unlike anything the Joka had ever encountered. Their ships were grotesque, designed with sharp, jagged angles that seemed to mimic the cruel nature of their creators. They were a race born of war, their vessels brimming with weapons and armored in ways that made the Joka's peaceful ships look fragile in comparison. The Xurth didn't just fight. They slaughtered with impunity. The Joka could see this now, as their long-range scanners detected the approaching enemy fleet. Dozens of enormous warships, each one a harbinger of death, accompanied by swarms of smaller, agile fighters. Admiral Kane stood at the helm of the perilous Dawn, his eyes narrowing as the enemy ships emerged from the dark folds of space. His fleet was already poised for combat, the Deathworlders' weapon systems primed and ready. The Xurth were brimming with the kind of malevolent confidence that only a race of conquerors could possess, and Kane had no intention of letting them succeed. His voice cut through the tension in the command center, calm but filled with resolve. "Ready the fleet. We strike at their heart." The Joka, for all their advanced technology and intellectual achievements, were utterly unprepared for what was about to unfold. They watched from their command stations in awe and terror, witnessing the scale of the impending confrontation. To them, this was more than just a battle. It was the survival of their entire way of life. They had no weapons capable of holding off the Xurth, but now they were reliant on the Deathworlders. The Xurth ships closed in, their weapons powering up. They didn't hesitate. They didn't need to. Their focus was singular: the complete destruction of the Joka. The Deathworlders, on the other hand, were a different kind of force. They didn't see this as a defense, but an offensive operation. Their ships surged forward, the perilous Dawn at the front, its massive weapons coming online with a deep, resonating hum. The first volley of fire was like a thunderclap, shattering the eerie silence of space. A massive beam of energy erupted from the perilous Dawn, slamming into the lead Xurth warship. The impact tore through its outer defenses, a brilliant flash of light igniting as the ship's hull cracked open. The Xurth retaliated immediately, launching volleys of plasma and missiles in a desperate attempt to hold back the Deathworlder advance. But the Deathworlders were prepared. The Ravager-class cruisers darted through the battlefield, their energy shields flickering as they absorbed the Xurth's fire. They returned with devastating precision, cutting through the Xurth ships like a scythe through wheat. The Hunter-class frigates closed the gap, their small, fast craft weaving in and out of enemy lines, delivering deadly boarding strikes and disabling the enemy's engines with pinpoint shots. The Joka watched in stunned silence as the Deathworlders turned the tide. Despite their technological prowess, the Joka were not warriors. Their ships were built for peaceful exploration, not war. Yet the humans had arrived with a fury and a mastery of combat that left the Xurth scrambling. With every volley of fire, the humans proved what the galaxy had feared. They were born from worlds where survival was not a choice, but an instinct. But even as the battle raged, something was off. The Xurth were not panicking as they should have been. They were retreating, but there was no chaos, no disarray. Something deeper was at play. Admiral Kane's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. "Watch for traps. This isn't just a fight. It's a lure. The Xurth are smarter than we thought." Kane's instincts were spot on. As his fleet closed in, a new wave of Xurth ships appeared from a previously undetected location. These ships were larger, more heavily armed, and far more numerous. The Deathworlders had walked right into a trap, an ambush, carefully timed and expertly executed. It was then that the Joka realized the true nature of their enemies. The Xurth weren't just invaders. They were hunters, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Deathworlders had just walked into that moment. The stillness of the Joka system was shattered when the first ripples of the Xurth fleet appeared at the farthest edges of the star system. The Deathworlder fleet had already taken position, their ships radiating a chilling aura of impending destruction. The Joka, who had been nervously awaiting their saviors, now understood the scale of the battle they were about to witness, and the depth of the threat they were facing. The Xurth fleet was unlike anything the Joka had ever encountered. Their ships were grotesque, designed with sharp, jagged angles that seemed to mimic the cruel nature of their creators. They were a race born of war, their vessels brimming with weapons and armored in ways that made the Joka's peaceful ships look fragile in comparison. The Xurth didn't just fight. They slaughtered with impunity. The Joka could see this now, as their long-range scanners detected the approaching enemy fleet. Dozens of enormous warships, each one a harbinger of death, accompanied by swarms of smaller, agile fighters. Admiral Kane stood at the helm of the perilous Dawn, his eyes narrowing as the enemy ships emerged from the dark folds of space. His fleet was already poised for combat, the Deathworlders' weapon systems primed and ready. The Xurth were brimming with the kind of malevolent confidence that only a race of conquerors could possess, and Kane had no intention of letting them succeed. His voice cut through the tension in the command center, calm but filled with resolve. "Ready the fleet. We strike at their heart." The Joka, for all their advanced technology and intellectual achievements, were utterly unprepared for what was about to unfold. They watched from their command stations in awe and terror, witnessing the scale of the impending confrontation. To them, this was more than just a battle. It was the survival of their entire way of life. They had no weapons capable of holding off the Xurth, but now they were reliant on the Deathworlders. The Xurth ships closed in, their weapons powering up. They didn't hesitate. They didn't need to. Their focus was singular: the complete destruction of the Joka. The Deathworlders, on the other hand, were a different kind of force. They didn't see this as a defense, but an offensive operation. Their ships surged forward, the perilous Dawn at the front, its massive weapons coming online with a deep, resonating hum. The first volley of fire was like a thunderclap, shattering the eerie silence of space. A massive beam of energy erupted from the perilous Dawn, slamming into the lead Xurth warship. The impact tore through its outer defenses, a brilliant flash of light igniting as the ship's hull cracked open. The Xurth retaliated immediately, launching volleys of plasma and missiles in a desperate attempt to hold back the Deathworlder advance. But the Deathworlders were prepared. The Ravager-class cruisers darted through the battlefield, their energy shields flickering as they absorbed the Xurth's fire. They returned with devastating precision, cutting through the Xurth ships like a scythe through wheat. The Hunter-class frigates closed the gap, their small, fast craft weaving in and out of enemy lines, delivering deadly boarding strikes and disabling the enemy's engines with pinpoint shots. The Joka watched in stunned silence as the Deathworlders turned the tide. Despite their technological prowess, the Joka were not warriors. Their ships were built for peaceful exploration, not war. Yet the humans had arrived with a fury and a mastery of combat that left the Xurth scrambling. With every volley of fire, the humans proved what the galaxy had feared. They were born from worlds where survival was not a choice, but an instinct. But even as the battle raged, something was off. The Xurth were not panicking as they should have been. They were retreating, but there was no chaos, no disarray. Something deeper was at play. Admiral Kane's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. "Watch for traps. This isn't just a fight. It's a lure. The Xurth are smarter than we thought." Kane's instincts were spot on. As his fleet closed in, a new wave of Xurth ships appeared from a previously undetected location. These ships were larger, more heavily armed, and far more numerous. The Deathworlders had walked right into a trap, an ambush carefully timed and expertly executed. It was then that the Joka realized the true nature of their enemies. The Xurth weren't just invaders. They were hunters, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Deathworlders had just walked into that moment. The tide of the battle was shifting, but the outcome was far from certain. The Deathworlder fleet had launched their counteroffensive with precision and ferocity, but the Xurth weren't known for folding easily. Kane stood at the helm of the perilous dawn, his eyes locked on the chaotic battlefield unfolding on the view screen before him. The Xurth, though struggling, were resilient, adapting their tactics with each passing second. The battlefield, now a roiling mess of flashing lights, destroyed ships, and fiery explosions, was a brutal reminder that no war was ever truly won without sacrifice. The Deathworlder ships were beginning to show signs of wear. Energy reserves were dropping. Shields flickered dangerously low, and even the mightiest of their dreadnoughts had taken hits that would have crippled lesser fleets. But it didn't matter. Kane could feel the hunger for victory rippling through his fleet. The Deathworlders didn't know how to quit, and they would bleed every last ounce of strength to see their enemies defeated. Push them harder. Kane's voice rang out over the comms, cold and resolute. At the flanks of the fleet, the Hunter-class frigates darted through the carnage, their sleek forms appearing and disappearing like ghosts amidst the barrage. They targeted key points, shields, engines, weapons, cutting apart the Xurth warships with surgical precision. The Ravager-class cruisers, though battered, fired relentlessly, their energy weapons cutting through Xurth hulls like a knife through butter. Explosions erupted as enemy ships disintegrated into space debris, but Kane's eyes remained fixed on the larger picture. The Xurth had underestimated the Deathworlders, but they still fought like cornered beasts. The Joka, still in orbit, watched the war unfold with mounting dread and awe. Their once fledgling hope that the Deathworlders might be able to protect them was beginning to look more like a grim reality. What had begun as an alliance to defend against a common enemy was rapidly turning into a one-sided war. The humans didn't just fight to survive. They fought with an intensity that was almost impossible to understand, a ferocity that seemed to defy the laws of nature itself. But even with the Deathworlders' brutal efficiency, Kane knew the Xurth were not simply going to allow themselves to be driven back. As the battle intensified, the Xurth flagship, a massive behemoth of dark metal and jagged spikes, moved to the center of the fray. This was the core of their strategy, the pinnacle of their technology. It was heavily armored, its weapon systems powerful enough to level a moon, and it was now pushing forward in a final bid to break the Deathworlder advance. "Admiral, they're concentrating fire on us," shouted one of the officers on the perilous Dawn's bridge. Kane didn't flinch. He had expected this move. The Xurth were throwing everything they had left into one final strike, hoping to take out the Deathworlder flagship and shatter their resolve. But Kane had no intention of letting that happen. "Divert all power to forward shields. Lock onto that flagship's weak points," he ordered, his voice unwavering. The Deathworlder fleet adjusted in unison. The perilous Dawn surged forward, its massive engines roaring to life as it closed in on the Xurth flagship. Kane's hand gripped the controls, and the ship's weapons began to hum with deadly power. Every gun, every missile launcher, every plasma cannon locked onto the Xurth flagship's hull. The Xurth flagship retaliated with a barrage of deadly fire, but the Deathworlder's shields held steady. The perilous Dawn's weapons fired, and a focused beam of energy shot out, striking the flagship with devastating force. The impact shattered the outer layers of the flagship's hull, and the Deathworlder fleet didn't let up. Every ship in the formation opened fire. Their combined might now concentrated on breaking through the Xurth flagship's defenses. Explosions erupted from within the flagship as the Deathworlder fire pierced through its shields. The Xurth retaliated desperately, launching missiles and sending waves of energy pulses, but it was too late. The flagship's primary engines exploded in a massive burst of energy, and its forward command center collapsed inward, sending a shockwave that tore through the remaining enemy ships. The heart of the Xurth fleet had been destroyed. Kane's voice crackled over the comms once again. "Hold steady, the battle's not over yet. But this is ours." The remaining Xurth forces, now leaderless and scattered, began to break formation. Some attempted to flee, others tried to regroup for a counterattack, but the Deathworlders pursued with relentless speed. One by one, the remaining enemy ships were reduced to debris, the last of the Xurth forces vanquished in a final fiery storm. With the Xurth fleet shattered and retreating into the void, the Deathworlders had claimed victory. Kane watched, his expression hard but satisfied, as the battlefield fell silent. The threat had been eliminated, but the cost had been steep. The Deathworlder fleet had endured heavy losses, but it had succeeded in its mission. The Xurth were no more. As the debris of the Xurth fleet drifted away in the silent void, the Deathworlders turned their attention to the Joka. Their victory had secured the system, but the war had left scars that would not fade quickly. Kane knew the Joka would remember this day, not as a day of rescue, but as the day the Deathworlders had come to show the universe that when it came to war, no one fought with the ferocity of humanity. The Deathworlders had won, and the galaxy would never forget the price of underestimating them.